So today we've got quite a full agenda, and I'm sure that in these very challenging times that we're living in at the moment, you will have all been to so many events that are about COVID-19 and the vaccine, testing, etc. Every point on which discussions are happening and have been over the last year, and the disproportionate impact it has had on many communities and on particularly some of our communities, and you'll have seen all of that. I wanted us to look today a little bit as the government has announced a roadmap towards looking ahead now, that we start looking a little bit perhaps at the move to recovery as well, and also a little bit at the future. So I wanted us to, I hope I'm being optimistic in a good way, and that we are moving towards that. And I want our sector to think about what's going to be happening. There will be lots of changes, and our sometimes optimisms are shattered by things that happen unduly. So I do hope we don't go into another wave, but schools have just opened this week, and we shall see. The good thing is the vaccination rollout in the whole of the country and across Greater Manchester has been very good indeed. And I think we are seeing the positive impact of that in terms of hospital numbers, in terms of infection rates, in terms of mortality rates. So let's hope we all move in that positive direction as we move forward. Lots of challenges ahead for us completely. And, we will, particularly post-March, because, lots has been in the sector to support us up till March, including from funders, and lots of emergency things have been happening. And I think, some of that may change as we move forward. For us, we don't have a massive sense of the sustainability within our community, not just for small organizations, but for all organizations. So there are some concerns and challenges ahead of us. But let's look at today. So half of the program up till half, sort of the next hour, we'll be looking at that recovery plan being planned for Greater Manchester, and also some of the other things that have been put in place to look at the inequalities in our system that were already there, but perhaps been exaggerated by the challenges over the last year, and also just a little bit around the state of our sector as we are seeing it currently. And then we'll have some breakout space for some discussion. And then the second half is very much focused on the funding and support out there. And we will be continuing to bring that information to you through the network on a regular basis. So I hope that's all very useful. Let me move on because I want to give time to our speakers. Let me welcome first Adrian Bates from the GMCA, that's the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. And Adrian's going to take us through a few things that are happening at the Combined Authority level, at Greater Manchester level, around the recovery plans, around the Greater Manchester Inequalities Commission, which is due to report not long now, and the newly set up Race Advisory Board. I thought these were elements that would be quite useful information for us. So if I bring Adrian in, and then I'll bring Alex Whinnom in straight after Adrian, and then if we have time, we can have some questions, but we may not have time. We'll go straight into our breakouts, and you can have some discussions on what you've heard as well in there. So over to you, Adrian. Thank you for joining us.
Well, it's fine. Thanks for inviting me. And I've just been realising that my slides are far too long. So apologies. I'm going to whistle stop still, but I will circulate them so you'll have loads of information. And because I think there are sort of three sort of big topics, lots going on, as as Atia says, and we're moving, obviously trying to move from a response phase into a recovery phase. But also looking at, really long-standing inequality issues that are way before COVID and the pandemic. I'm going to try and share my screen if this works. Can you see that? Yep. Okay. Cool. So 3 topics, and so like I say, I will. So just quickly to canter through, there is a Living with COVID Resilience Plan, which is part of the Greater Manchester Combined Authority response structures. There is a recovery group, which I understand Atia and Charles sits on. So there is a voice there from plus others, and maybe Alex sits on there as well. I can't see anyone now, around the voluntary and community sector. And this was really the point of the Living with COVID plan, was really to bring together some key elements of the Greater Manchester strategy, which is a more long-standing strategy. What were the key things that really need to change and respond to over 1 year? It covers quite a large number of things, as you could imagine. And we're not necessarily going to go through everything individually. It covers things from really practical things around physical activity and food poverty and employment support. But also there's a great deal of stuff around the system change that's needed and how people need to work differently together, more collaboration. And that's because actually that system, the way we operate as a public service system, was not going to be able to respond effectively necessarily to the pandemic. So our individual thematic and organisational approach is not going to be sufficient. We need to work much more collaboratively and more in line with the public service reform principles. What it's been able to do is obviously focus it's focused our attention on the impacts arising from the pandemic and being able to track those. So going from an initial assessment of what the impacts are going to be, we'll be able to track those. And unfortunately, I suppose in some ways, the impacts have not significantly changed. Maybe the nature of the presentation has changed, so we might have gone from an immediate emergency response, but more into a longer term recovery. But the key issues are still the key issues. Challenges are the challenges. We've got a greater understanding though now, and it's good, I suppose in some ways. It's long overdue, I'm sure, but there is a greater focus on poverty and inequality, the recognition that these are key drivers, and those people, the people who have suffered before COVID, are now suffering even more. And I know people like yourselves have been championing this for a long time, and I think it's important that it's finally that GMCA and others are recognising this and taking appropriate action. And also we're looking at the really longer term impacts of the pandemic. And as things move on and the world changes, the challenges change, but also there's the need for us to, again, work more collaboratively with communities, not to them, continue to be reinforced. What we've also had over the past 3 months, so maybe since last time I spoke to you or someone came, was we've invested in a Living with COVID residents survey to try and understand, to get some really local insight. There's a vast amount of insight data that appears nationally, and there's been some really good local insight from people like yourselves, Caribbean African Health Network, from the Big Disability Survey, LGBT Foundation. And so to complement that sort of targeted insight, there is a general resident survey, which does pick up, and it has been representative over our diverse communities of Greater Manchester. So the rates and the response rates are sort of relevant and representative, but it gives us a really broad view on where we need to target our communications, but also look for more greater engagement. And the findings of the survey, which is done every month, the findings are put on our website, kind of give a feeling for what people are thinking about the pandemic, thinking about recovery. So there's some headline results, but like I said, I can send any links or anything anyone wants afterwards. I'll circulate the presentation. So in terms of the impact, and you won't be able to, I know you won't be able to read the screen, but I suppose it kind of gives you, and I'll be able to share the report, or actually will, what goes out into the recovery. But there is this sort of overarching thing, so to kind of give you an idea that the significant impacts identified in September around health impacts on people and the educational impacts are deeper red. And our potential positives around digital shift have in some ways drifted towards the amber because of the impact of digital exclusion. So some of the positives, or some of the things that we hoped, it's not a great picture. And I think this kind of shows that absolutely the impact that it's had on everyone, on frontline public services, on the voluntary and faith and community sector, on residents, on everyone, has been significant, and it has been unprecedented. So there's a lot for us to work on. Where we're heading next is obviously we're looking towards creating a refreshed Greater Manchester strategy. Rough timescales of that are September this year, later this year, and we're and obviously all this is going to form and move into that. I'm hoping, maybe don't quote me on this, but I'm pushing that it has a clear, much more focus on equality and inequality, and the structures that we've been putting in place through which I'll talk about, the Inequalities Commission, the new Tackling Inequalities Board, and the awareness and the interest from our political leaders around inequality. I'm hoping we'll start to sort of shift this into a much more of an equality and equity space. So there's loads going on, lots of significant issues. Some of the latest things in the latest report, so we're in Q2 now of the report. I think it's the second report. Some of the things that are coming up that are, the real areas of focus are around, one, the Independent Inequality Commission, and not just receiving that report. It's about how do we actually embed and respond to the recommendations. So I'll talk about the Commission in a minute. But the key issue is this is not just, and the Commission is not just for an inequalities board or an equalities silo of officers and workers. It's for our growth, our economic growth people. It's for our public service reform people. It's for our education, our housing. It's about the root causes of inequality. So what we're really conscious of is not creating a structure that picks up inequalities over here and everyone else can just carry on as you were. It's about how do we embed inequalities and equalities throughout them all. And that's that embedding the infrastructure. Greater awareness and understand the role of place and on health and healthy outcomes. So there's been, so running alongside at the same time as the Independent Equality Commission, there's Marmot. There's a lot of work going around Marmot, health indicators, and they will come together to look at a consistent set of measures around inequality that run throughout all aspects of policy life. And that sort of those, Marmot isn't new. It's been around for a long time, 10 years of Marmot, but we really need to, again, embed that and ensure that housing, transport, policing, all public services are contributing to health and healthy outcomes. Huge impact on employment and skills, the end of the furlough scheme, but also interesting, been working with the local enterprise partnership recently, who are recruiting some new members and who are really keen on championing and forwarding the diversity agenda. So diversity in leadership within the economy, and diversity and fairness within the workforce. So that's really good, and I understand they'll recruit some more diverse members as well. So some positives and opportunities there. Sustainable food has obviously been a huge issue, and looking at actually, so we don't rely on the great work of a Premiership footballer to champion where we need to be. Social care, obviously, again, and there's big changes around health and social care partnership that's kind of running alongside this. So that really needs to be understood and rolled out. So some of the big issues there. Some other things more maybe about how we're working together, about understanding accountabilities, really looking at moving away from our steep thematic or organisational silos into multi-agency responses. This is the thing, this is the public service reform white paper that came out a couple of years ago that really needs to move on from really good pilot projects in different areas to actually scaled up across the whole of Greater Manchester. So as you can see, loads of stuff going on. There's obviously some, challenges within the public service capacity to deliver this, in the sense alongside a recovery phase, a response phase, a business as usual phase, and a stretched workforce. Plus throw in a mayoral election and local elections, which always add fun to the situation. So that's the kind of recovery plan. Like I say, Atia and Charles are on it, plus probably others. It's important that these are worked collaboratively. They're not being done to people, but they are about how we work together, and that's important at a strategic level as well as operational. So I can't see anyone's hands up, so I'm just going to canter through Atia, if that's okay. Give us a nod so I can see you. So independent, just an update on the commission in case. I'm not sure what you know so far, but just as a quick summary, established in autumn 2020, deep dive, chaired by Professor Kate Pickett, University of York. Obviously written some really interesting pieces of work around inequality. Brought together a really good group of commissioners. Lord Simon Woolley, I've been doing some work with the Race Equality Panel, Saeed Acha, who's been working with young people and Youth Combined Authority, amongst others. They are looking at being this critical friend. They've had lots of engagement with people, maybe not as much as they wanted to, but they had to balance a whole, a lengthy period of co-production with the need to actually get something out and something done. And the feedback has been very strong that there's been enough talking, there's enough knowledge, there's enough insight, we need action. But they have had some good sessions with people have been invited, and people, and I think they've been pleased by the openness of public servants and policy leads to change and the ideas that they've received from the community. So the report about March, 26th of March, Friday the 26th of March is Combined Authority Day. There's going to be a launch event, which will be open, and a short launch event with some speakers before the final report goes to the CA. So the report will actually be available on the 19th, the week before. We can make sure that gets circulated as soon as it comes out. Just to canter through it, it's looking at, I think clearly that we need to move beyond the Equality Act, whilst not disregarding the Equality Act, because it's clear that in some places we don't even meet the Equality Act. But we need to increase this to look at poverty, the intersectionality between poverty, health, housing. It's also about long-term, and the pandemic. The Commission have really been looking at the root causes, not necessarily our public service response to inequality, but more about the root causes, which has moved it much more into a democracy and economic space. So to kind of give you an idea, I think maybe a traditional approach to inequality commission may look just around it. I don't know if you can see me mouse moving, look at demographic inequalities, and we take that sort of almost singular approach. But that we don't need to do, we need to move away from this. We also need to move away from an individual. We need to look at this intersection, people's lives cut across multiple of these and multiple of these. So how does that actually all work together, and how does it actually form these long-term outcomes that are actually entrenched across our different spaces, but across time? So it's been a really deep dive and cross-cutting. So it's, there will be things that you will read and think, well, why haven't they looked at this? Why haven't they looked at that? They haven't considered this. This hasn't come out. It isn't. They have had a focus on structural racism, just to, I suppose, to identify one of these to consider across, because of things like Black Lives Matter and the impact of the pandemic they've chosen, that it's not, and I have to say, having been involved in it, the things they've thrown up about structural racism actually apply to disability, sexual orientation, age, sex. They apply to those things. The things around voice, hidden voices, being done to, discrimination. It actually probably cuts across them all. So that's what it's been looking at. Kind of give you an idea of the flow. It's been a hectic 6 months gathering all this information, but there has been a process, as you would imagine, and it has followed those. So to give you an idea, these are emerging recommendations. Again, we haven't seen the final report. The final report is being drafted as we speak. And it's interesting that a lot of the things, whilst being radical, the solutions may be radical. A lot of the things aren't new. The things that have been discussed about, and things that have been championed by yourselves for a long time. But again, this is around power and voice, racism and discrimination, the barriers, and this unless we actually remove the barriers, we will be constantly trying to create a sticking plaster of helping those people who are discriminated, as opposed to removing that in the first place. So that really focuses on the prevention agenda. Some of the things that haven't quite landed. So last year there was an independent prosperity review. In 2019, and there's been commissions around cooperatives and new models of economic approaches that haven't necessarily landed, haven't been taken forward. So again, an opportunity to build on things, refocus, and start to look at the impact of things like the foundational economy, austerity. What do we need to do differently to increase fairness within our economy? How do we need to actually scale up things like the Good Employment Charter? So these good pilots need to be scaled up. So that is the Independent Inequalities Commission. Quickly, my third part, I don't know what I'm doing for time. So I'll quickly canter through.
You've got about a minute, Adrian.
All right, so quickly cantering through, just for the recap, we've got a number of equality panels. These are their roles: champion, advise, hold to account, support and challenge. Obviously, they're all busy. I wouldn't like to, we asked to focus on the race equality panel, but lots of different things happening across them. Lots of new ways of working. That's some of the things, that's their role: insight, communication, co-design, and collaboration. Sorry about the really busy slide, but there's been a lot going on since December. Elizabeth Cameron is the chair, who you may know, you may not know, just active trade unionist and equality advisor and supporter. They're really wanting to focus on structural racism and how that runs throughout all different policy areas. They met twice in January, looking at policing and supporting the commission. Had 2 sessions with Simon Woolley for the Independent Inequalities Commission, which has been really good. They've looked at workforce race equality, and as well as the panel meetings, it's really good that policy teams are starting to want to talk to them, come and speak to them about things like homelessness, community safety, policing. So it's more than just a monthly meeting. It's along with a full panel. There's opportunities to get involved outside, and the chair is really keen to promote the panel in all places, and has been going around. So that's been really active. And the membership, if you don't know, is on our website. I'll put the link in the chat in a minute. Just finally, one more point, just to kind of give you an idea about what's coming up. On the 17th of March, we're having the first meeting of a new faith advisory panel. It's much more of a network. It's much more of a network of networks rather than there won't be an open recruitment. This is about building on all the great interfaith networks that we have and the faith organisation that we have in Greater Manchester, bringing those together to look at really collaboration. So in some ways, it's more of a partnership than a panel. It will be co-designed with the members. We're looking to really to shape it over the next few months so it works for people. And so we're not presenting the terms of reference on day one saying this is it. It's going to be shaped by the members. So all 10 interfaith organisations from across the 10 boroughs have been invited, plus people like the Council of Mosques and the Muslim Jewish Association and lots of other organisations. So that is where we're up to. That was my whistle-stop tour. Hopefully that was okay with everyone, and we'll try and figure out how to stop share. Hopefully, is that okay?
Thank you very much, Adrian. Thanks very much, Adrian. I'm sure people will have loads of questions and comments, but can I encourage you to put them perhaps in the chat box? I don't know how much longer you are with us, Adrian.
I'm here till 11.
Right. We'll see how our program goes, because I'm already running differently, I think, to what had been planned on the agenda, but we'll move on. Can I bring you in, Alex, to just give us a bit of a detail on what the state of the sector is currently?
Yeah, thanks, Satya. Luckily, some of the things I thought I might have to update about, Adrian has covered. So I thought I'll try and do a little bit of an overview of some of the things that are burning a hole in my mind at the moment. I am intending to finish on an optimistic note, but I'm going to start on a very pessimistic one, because I think the first thing we need to bear in mind is that with all the good talk that's going on, we have actually gone backwards quite considerably due to COVID, Brexit, and a centralising government which is hell-bent on austerity. The budget wasn't a great surprise to me. I don't know how many of you were waiting for it with bated breath, but basically we are seeing further cuts to local authorities and public services. We are seeing some small amounts of tokenistic almost investment in particular places and particular projects. But there is really nothing in there to give us hope in terms of meeting the needs that have arisen from COVID or the needs that will arise from a crashing economy. Sorry, Adrian. Yeah, and sorry to anyone else who perhaps is coming from public sector or others who perhaps would take a less extreme line. We've all got a further problem, I think, in the sense that we're in Greater Manchester, which is heavily Labour dominated. It's a Conservative government which is quite party political in its approach. So you will notice that some of the funds that are being targeted into GM will tend to go into those places where they have a narrow Conservative majority or are hoping to acquire one. That's my very cynical view of that. In terms of our own sector, we're still waiting for proper results from the State of the Sector survey that was carried out last year. And the reason why it's proving so difficult is because there is a very bizarre kind of conglomeration of data. On the plus side, we had a really excellent response rate. Salford University is struggling to make sense of it. And I think what we won't get out of it are things that we have previously got out, like sheer numbers of organisations, numbers of volunteers and so on. What we will get out is quite a lot of information about how the nature of our sector is changing. And one of the most striking features has been a growth in community-led organisations and actually of organisations led by Black, Asian, ethnic minority, other minority populations, which is quite interesting. We are seeing the medium-sized organisations, voluntary organisations, charities, and some social enterprises, and particularly those that provide services and support for humans, are really, really struggling now because all sources of support are kind of drying up at once. So we'll see a very mixed picture, and I think we'll see a number of different sectors emerging. And the other kind of interesting side is the growth of social enterprise, community business, community-owned organisations. And I think that's really positive, actually, in the context. But again, it's still all of that is not going to change the economy overnight. There's been an awful lot of talk. We had Black Lives Matter, and then we've had, I suppose, the chest beating and weeping and wailing over the impact of COVID upon ethnic minority and other disadvantaged communities in GM, which many of us will not be in the slightest bit surprised about. And it's almost like some of us may be saying, well, look, we told you so. However, there have been some kind of positive movements since then, and this is where I start to get slightly more optimistic, because I have never heard so much discussion of race and race equity and more sensitive kind of understanding of the impact on different minority communities than I have in the last few months. You have to be slightly cautious. I've said since 2010 really that what happens is, as the public sector becomes more and more squeezed, they become more and more interested in partnership working. Unfortunately, that doesn't parallel sharing of resources. And the ultimate decision for me is going to be, is the public sector, given that it's being squeezed at the moment massively, is it going to be prepared both to share its money with frontline organisations like many of you run, and who are best placed to help and support in communities, not just with social care, but also with restarting the economy on a local footprint? How much is it prepared to do that? Or will it be all about, can we support local authorities? Can we support CCGs? Can we support the hospitals? And then the second thing, which I think comes out really, really strongly in Kate's report, and Adrian did mention it on one of his slides, but you had to cover a hell of a lot, Adrian, in a short time, is the thing about who gets to decide, who is involved, who is around the table when decisions are made that affect people's lives. I've always said when in conversations with the public sector, I want two things from you. I want power and I want money, and I want to redistribute it into communities and into citizen-led organisations who are better placed to do a lot of these things. Kate picked up really strongly, and I know she's quite keen on this personally, an absence of any sense of agency amongst the Greater Manchester population. People really feel powerless. They feel that things are being done to them. They can sort out stuff on a neighbourhood and on a local basis with the communities that they support and work within, and do some really positive and helpful things. What people are struggling with is kind of getting around the policy agenda and actually influencing what happens, what is prioritised. Adrian started to touch on some of that, I think, quite a lot in talking about there is a need to think differently about policy and about public service and about the role of the different actors within the place for us to be able to actually run Greater Manchester much more equally, much more equitably, and much more for the benefit of the people. But that requires very, very radical change, and it requires some people with a lot of power at the moment to be prepared to give it up. So I think that's going to be the big challenge. And I'm really interested to see, there's so much good hype around the report, and I think it will be excellent, and I think it will be very, very challenging. I think the big acid test for all of us, absolutely all of us, is going to be, do we really take it in the spirit in which it's meant, or do we try to pretend that it's only telling us what we know already and that we're already addressing these problems? Because I'm really sure we're not. As Adrian said, there's mayoral elections coming up shortly. We will be running hustings for the voluntary sector. It looks like the date of that's going to be noon on the 14th of April, so that's a heads up. But I want to link that into the point about agency, because I think all of us have more agency than we realise, and people talk a lot about soft power. We have got more soft power at this point than we have ever had in all of my time at GMCVO, which is getting on for years. This is the moment to start making quite unreasonable demands, to make sure that people are registered to vote, to make sure that people are filling in the census forms, because these are the things that make us visible and make us heard. And I want a huge contingent from the BAME network to be turning up at that hustings and giving all the candidates for the mayoral post absolute grilling and ask them really difficult questions, because I think that's the way you start to shift things on the GM footprint. So that's my rant. I haven't given you much information. This is more kind of like views and opinions, I guess. I'm really happy to answer any questions about anything to do with our sector or the policy work that GMCVO does or anything, either in the chat or everybody knows where to find me. Just send me afterwards. Good luck with it all. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alex. I'm going to change the agenda slightly. We should have been by now in some breakout space having some conversation, but I wanted you to hear, Adrian's presentation well, and Alex's too. And I thought that was important just to get a bit of an idea about that wider picture going on around us, so that we can begin to think about it. There may be things in there that you haven't thought about or know about, and that's really important that you begin to understand the type of structures that are in place for us to be able to work through. So if you don't mind, we won't go into breakout space. I'll handle that in a different way, because what I don't want to do is eat into the time I've allocated for the funders discussions, because I think many of you would want to hear that, so I don't want to shorten them. And because we've got Adrian here till 11, I want to take the opportunity, if anybody has a question for Adrian around the recovery or the Inequalities Commission or the setup of the various advisory boards, then I would like to take up the next 5 minutes or so on any discussion or questions around that while Adrian is here, or for any questions or discussion around some of the things that Alex has mentioned. So I'll open the floor a little bit and see if anybody wants to make any comment or ask a question or further clarification on these issues. If you want to just put your hand up, or so I've got Makbul. Did you want to make a comment or?
Yeah, so I was just unmuting. It was really a question to Adrian, because in his presentation he mentioned tackling structural racism, and I'm just wondering what kind of initiatives, interventions Adrian was actually, well, his team are actually looking into, because I know it's a complex subject.
Well, that was the underpinning from when we did consultation for the race equality panel. A lot late, I suppose, last year, structural racism came out as across all the different priorities. So whether it was policing, housing, health, economy, there was it sort of underpinned that. So that, and the panel members, there's 24 panel members who were really keen that actually that should be the lens that they view all the different policy areas. So in terms of the forward plan, so they're going to meet monthly. They're looking at, I think they're looking at, they looked at the workforce race equality strategy. So across all public services have signed up to a workforce race equality strategy, which has a number of measures, one around publishing data around race equality, also around training and development and leadership. And so we had a really interesting discussion about, and it was about how can the panel support and champion that work, and also hold to account leaders to make sure that actually it takes place. They're working with Great Manchester Police around. There was a report due around proportionality in policing and race equality in policing. So they've been working with, or looking to work with GMP to kind of help develop that report and action plan prior to gets published. And I think so, and I suppose they're also going to be in the forward plan is to look at elements of health. Well, I suppose it's a challenge because they're there as an advisory body, so they can provide support and challenge to public services. They're in a sort of co-design way, but I suppose they're limited on the initiatives that they can undertake other than championing the agenda.
Thanks, Adrian. I think there's a massive challenge ahead of us, I would say, in all sorts of fronts, including at the GMCA. And I'm glad structural racism and discrimination is being given high priority. What we have is an uphill struggle because we have no representation currently across the systems. We have GMP in special measures. I don't know whether it still is. So, you know, it's an uphill task, actually. We're going to take there's 3 people with their hands up. I'll ask the first two questions. I'll bring in the first two so that you can respond together, perhaps. Kulsum from Rochdale, do you want to ask?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a quick one, Adrian, just wanted to ask, in terms of the panels and the advisory panels, the faith advisory panel and the race panel, how is the membership made up of those? And also, will there be an opportunity for any other organisations that may be not invited to the panel to be able to feed in and to learn from the intelligence that is there?
For the race equality panel, we had 163 applicants and managed to get down to a 24, which was really difficult. They are there as individuals providing a voice from a community. They're not there to represent, because no one could represent a whole community. So we are trying to get people who are connected into different communities, different geographies from across the 10. In terms of the people who weren't successful, we have kind of put together a bit of a mailing list at this stage, where we're trying to share information about what the panel are doing, and hopefully in the future, when we get more and more opportunities to influence policymakers, those opportunities will be offered out to that mailing list. And we could start to build up, so it's a bit of a broader network. So there's about 80 people who are obviously keen. There's lots of people keen. We just find out it is a challenge. I think the challenge is we can set these. I'll be honest and say we can set these panels up, and you can have like brilliant people, but they're only as good as the public sector world around them that are prepared to listen and engage and change because of the insight they get. So, I spend a lot of time, as well as working with the panel members, spend a lot of time working within GMCA and within public services, trying to make engagement actually impactful. So, I can sell a really good story, but there is an element of honesty there. So,
thanks, Adrian.
But a welcome opportunity. If you wanted to get more involved, you want to be added to the list and find out more, you can do. The faith one is a network of networks. So we've gone out to existing faith and interfaith networks, asking them to put someone forward. Again, if you wanted to know who is on that list so far, again, drop me an email. I'll put my email in the chat and I can tell you who's been invited so far. And if you think, hold on, but there's a faith or an interfaith network missing, then we'll start to grow that and develop as it goes along.
Thank you.
I think the question is alluding to communications and engagement right across the sector, right, Adrian? So maybe that could be quite a useful thing, is how do people actually get to know what's there without being constantly on the GMCA website or in the know, or being on a meeting like this where they are maybe privileged to have heard you. That's the question. How does the sector get to know? I mean, I've only heard today in terms of the faith network myself, while you've come on, in terms of developments there. So some sort of comms needs to go out to people wider, so that the wider community knows, and it's not just the usual people and the usual suspects. I'll bring in Caroline.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just sort of like listening to kind of what's been said this morning. I'm very, very new to this network forum. I head the equality and diversity across the Northwest for an organisation called User Voice, who work in collaboration with probation services. In addition to that, we're also we work with the police, etc. And it's representing people's voices within the criminal justice system. And we have people who have lived experience of all the issues that people face. And we collect the evidence, or we engage with other service users and listen to what it is that they're saying that their issues are. We then collaboratively and democratically kind of come up with a theme of what people are saying, and we then put solution-based proposals to key decision makers, and it works. It works for two reasons. One, because it's authentic, because it's people with the same lived experiences engaging with people with similar lived experiences. It's evidence-based, so it's actually taking it, so to speak, from the horse's mouth. And it's then going to the key decision makers and saying, this is what people are saying the issue is. This is what we suggest you do about it. And so kind of listening around the room today, and I'm kind of thinking, is there not a forum to enable that, so that you know, and thank you for kind of mentioning about the language as well today, Chair, because I have a bit of an issue with regards to the BAME kind of, you know. So I would say if people who are come under the bracket of racial equality, you know, like, let's actually listen to what it is they are saying, their everyday issues that they're facing, you know, like, get that evidence on the table, and then have a similar situation with the solution-based proposals and say, this is what people are saying, and then go to the key decision makers and say, this is what we suggest you do about it. No, and I'm just wondering if there's a forum for that at the moment, you know, because I'm fairly new and I don't, you know, I apologise if there is, but I just wanted to put that idea out there, really.
Caroline, I'm not sure that there is a direct answer for that. I mean, I would be able to answer that and have conversation with you. I'm more than happy to have that outside of the meeting as well, in terms of user-led forums and really patient voice as well, is kind of citizen voice, I think, is what we're talking about. I'm not sure there is a citizens panel. Adrian, is there, if you can answer that quickly? No.
No, well, I suppose the challenge is we're operating across 10, there's 10 districts, which each have their own engagement and communication structures and user, so every, you know, a lot of public services will have a user forum, and then plus their more broad community forums. And then at GM level, we have a number of equality panels. We've got groups like this. We've got the GM Equality Alliance. So there's a whole range of things happening. Yeah. Sometimes it's the challenge is trying to make sense of it.
I think what Caroline's kind of talking about is a more user-led voice. I think, if I understand that correctly.
Yeah,
and it's a more an expert voice, and I do think that that's a big issue. There are structures at a district level that do that through the CCGs on patient voice, for example, or etc. But I think it's a very, very important point as we begin to move into the integrated care system structure, which is currently under proposal. So I think that would be another topic for us to really bring to the GM network meeting for the next time. I'm going to kind of move on because we've got quite a challenging timetable, but I had two people who wanted to make comment. I'm going to let them make comment, but not necessarily get responses because we do have to move on, but I do want Adrian to hear the comments that are coming and the concerns. So I've got somebody who, I apologize, I don't know your name, NWG Manchester.
Oh, that's Adi Lazo, the chair of the Nigerian Women's Group in Manchester. Yes, I think you and Adrian had answered part of my question. I was going to ask about the Faith Advisory Panel, you know, how it's formed. And I want to know whether the Church of England has got representation, you know, amongst that, you know, that panel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you answer that fast?
I suppose the one thing to say is it's not formed as in it's not a finished product. It's the start of a formation of a product. Great Manchester churches together are on the list, have been invited, as have the Faith Network for Manchester, plus every other interfaith group from the 10 districts. The Great Manchester Faith Community Leaders will be representative. The Dean, the Cathedral Dean will be attending. So there is, and then plus there are people from Sikhs, Hindu, humanists, Buddhists, Jain, Baha'i, if I said that right. I'm trying to make sure it's inclusive and there is people there. And then the idea is that it will then grow from, those people will grow, well, those people identify who need to be in the room. It's not, you know, I'm not selecting who's there and who's not there. I've taken my lead from various people from within the faith sector who are currently active, like Rabbi Warren Elf and Steve Williams from the Faith Leaders and others who should be, and Charles who should be invited to the first one. So Charles has been involved. Yeah, we've done some element of early conversations with people. Again, it's not, I've not cooked this up myself. This is an idea that I've had some conversations with people in order to get to a stage where we get to a first meeting and then they grow. And I think we encourage all panel members to talk about what they do and spread the word.
Again, of communications, if you could perhaps send us information about that, we'd be more than happy to circulate it to everybody who's on this call today and to the whole of the network and post it on the GM network website so people are able to do that.
Just one sentence. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. I've just seen the chat. Things that Charles has put to the chat. I'm happy that the Dean of the Cathedral and the Bishop of Manchester is involved because I'm a canon of the Cathedral too. So it's okay. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you. Very quickly, I know Abdul's been waiting very patiently. If you could make your comment, Abdul.
Yeah, sorry, but my comment was about breakout room discussion. Is it all right or no? I mean, can I?
No, so we've changed the program slightly because we didn't have the time.
All right.
We're not going to do the breakout discussions, but we've stayed on here. So thank you very much. I apologize for that.
It's okay.
Excellent. I think I'm going to have to move on because it is 11 o'clock. I'll probably have to eat 5 minutes into the next bit in terms of the funding conversations. But what I'm going to do is thank you, Adrian and Alex, for your contributions and taking questions, etc. Thank you very much. We've got a number of speakers following on around funding and around support that is being developed across the sector. And I think that would be really useful to hear about. But I'm going to give everybody a few minutes break and come back at about just after 5 past. While you're on the break, if you want to use the chat box and just put in there for me any ideas you think you have on things that would help the system address the issue of lower take-up amongst our communities of the vaccine. Or if you want to put in the chat some of the stuff that Adrian's talking about recovery, what do you think our sector would need in terms of recovery? So anything around that, if you can put it in the chat box, and then we'll see you again in about 4 or 5 minutes. So everybody here? Fantastic. Excellent. Let's move on because we've got quite a bit to cover. I'm sure I've got the next speakers here. So the next kind of bit is all about looking ahead of us, really. So we're going to have quite a bit of this at this network event and future network events so that we begin to start bringing in the support and the help and the information and resources that are out there potentially that would be available. So the first people I'm going to bring on are from BBC Children in Need. And I'm going to bring on Chris Turner. Chris, I think you're here.
Hello, yes.
Brilliant. And I know that your CEO, Simon, is with us as well, and he's joined us, which is fantastic. Welcome, Simon.
Hi, thank you. Hi.
Really, really good to have you here. And I'm going to pass it over to you, Chris, to introduce your team. And hopefully you've got about, it's 25 minutes, Chris, maybe 20 minutes, okay for you?
Yeah, that'll be fine. Yeah, I can cut a bit down.
I mean, we can do more of this, but Chris will tell you the purpose of why it's really important today that they're here. Certainly they will join us in the future too, but I'm really pleased that we're working with you and that this opportunity is here. And I know some of our members do apply successfully to Children in Need and are really pleased with you as a funder. So over to you, Chris.
Great, thank you for that. That's a really nice introduction. So as Atia says, I'm Chris Turner. I'm what's called an Impact Officer for Children in Need, which is just our way of describing what you probably know as a grants officer. I've also got my colleague Siobhan on the call, who is another officer in our team. And Simon Antrobus, our CEO, has got some time as well. So he's come to join us, which is very exciting and just a little bit of pressure for me, but that's absolutely fine. So I'm going to run through a little bit about us as a funder and our processes. I'm hoping to take about 10 minutes doing that. If you've got questions as I go through that, please do pop them in the chat. After about 10 minutes in, I'm going to pause just to run through a few of those. So if Atia, you could maybe present some of those, that'd be great. And Simon has said that he's willing to answer some of those questions as well. So if he's got some answers for you, I'm sure we'll be putting them across. So if you just bear me 2 seconds whilst I do the awkward thing of trying to remember how to share my screen whilst I'm being watched. Right, can people see that?
Yes.
Fantastic. So as I said, today's session, I'm going to go over who we are as a funder and our current grant program. After that, I'll be pausing and we'll take a few questions. But if there's time after that, I'll go through some more information about what makes a great application to us. All of this information is on our website, so do check there for that kind of context. I won't be sending the slides out because some of the information changes slightly as we progress through different grant programs, so it's best to check the website. So who are we as a funder? You probably know BBC Children in Need because we've got quite a high profile, but we believe that every child in the UK has the right to be safe, happy and secure, and with the ability to reach their potential. Those are our key strategic aims, and every grant we fund will be working towards outcomes which broadly fit into those kind of categories. We raise our money via our annual appeal, which I'm sure you're aware of with PUDSI, and then we spend all that money on grants. The organisations we fund kind of split into 2 categories based on the 2 grant programmes. For our small grants programme, which I'll be defining in a little while, there must be a not-for-profit organisation with a constitution, and they must meet our minimum standards for grant making. That's something I'll go on to explain, but handily Owen's put a link to those minimum standards in the materials that were sent out before, so you should be able to find those pretty easily. And for our main grants, you must be not-for-profit and registered with an appropriate body. Usually that's a charity commission or company's house. But again, organisations must meet our minimum standards for grant making. So what are they? So our minimum standards are kind of a low bar threshold by which organisations must meet in order to apply to us. We say they're quite a low bar. We set them up in consultation with the sector and we're continually thinking about them. I'm not going to go through all of them now because they're on our website, but just to give you a little bit of context for what they are. Finance ones are your organisation must be producing accounts. Governance minimum standards includes your governing board must be meeting quarterly and your constitution must define you as not-for-profit. And safeguarding minimum standards include things like having a policy, having a lead safeguarding officer, relevant training throughout your organisation up to board level for the types of training which is appropriate for the role which that person has in your organisation, and appropriate DBS checks. So as I say, do check those before you come to us. If you've got any specific questions, there's a number on screen now where you can call to discuss them more. We're also really interested to know a bit more if you feel that those are too high or if there's a real barrier there with those minimum standards, because we really want to make sure our funding is accessible to the right organisation. So do talk to us about how you feel about those minimum standards and if you think we need to refine them. Okay, I'm going to go on to talk a little bit about the grant programs we've currently got open. The first one is our main grant program. So organisations can apply for £10,001 per year for up to 3 years. We're highly unlikely to award funding of more than 40k for a 1 or 2 year project, and we're highly unlikely to award above 100,000 in total for a 3-year project. And on the flip side of that is our small grant program. So this is for organisations who want to apply for up to and including £10,000 or less per year, again for up to 3 years. We really recognise that a really small amount of money can make a huge difference, and small grants are often the way organisations first come to children in need to learn a bit more about our processes, how we work as a funder, and then build up that relationship and develop into a main grant. There's a third bullet point in there just for people who might be aware of our small grant programme. So normally we would have requested that if you were coming to us for a small grant, you'd need to apply for more than half of the total project costs. But we've refined that, so you can actually apply for less than 50% of your total project costs. Equally, if you wanted to come to us for the full costs, either through the main grant or the small grant programme, that is fine as well. So just a little bit now on the kind of things you can apply for. So we look to fund project delivery primarily. That includes staffing, salary costs, venue hire, transport, refreshments, all things like that. But we're sort of developing our approach and thinking more about how we can fund creative solutions to deliver much needed services and organisational costs to support stability and adaptation. So previously, Children in Need was very much focused on just being a project funder, but in listening to the sector about what they really need from funders, we've broadened that slightly. So we're much more open to funding wider organisational support costs. But there are some things which you cannot apply for. Again, do check our website for more information about this lot of information. But we can't fund work which statutory bodies have a duty to fund. We can't fund capital or building projects. We don't fund individuals or money for you to pass on to a different organisation to deliver a project for. We can't fund work which has started before the grant is given, or work which is going to start 12 months after the date from which you would find out if you were awarded the grant. And we very rarely fund work within school time unless there's a very, very clear reason for this. That's often a question that you'll get asked if you come to us for work which is happening in school time. We'll be asking why that's most appropriate for the children and young people, and why that isn't duplicating funding which might already be in place, perhaps to access to curriculum or other forms of statutory support. So if you're applying for something in school hours, do be prepared to talk a little bit about that. Okay, so for the application process, you will use the portal on our website. So if you just do a quick Google search for Children in Need, you should be easily able to find us. You're able to set up an online account, and through there you would submit the application through to us. At that stage, you can come to us for advice. We're not able to read applications, but we can talk a little bit about the sort of things you might be wanting to apply to us for. We can give you bits of guidance on policy and things like that. So I would be your primary contact in Greater Manchester for things like that. So I'll be putting my contact details up at the end. But we also have a central team who are also able to advise. They're the team I mentioned who know about the minimum standards. Again, I'll be giving you those information a little bit later. Once you submit the application through to us, you'll get an email acknowledgement and some information of the next stages, and we'll do an initial review. That is to make sure we've got a balanced portfolio at a local level. And what that means really is that we're trying to reach as many children and young people across the whole of the North as possible. So if we have got an area whereby we're looking for applications, we might be more inclined to put them through to the next stage because we want to get that reach out there. We will check your eligibility and your minimum standards at that point as well. So it's really great if you can check that beforehand just to make sure that you're meeting those criteria. And if you're invited to the next stage, an assessor will contact you to arrange a telephone call. If it's a small grants application, that call is really just going to focus on safeguarding with maybe 1 or 2 additional questions. And for a main grant application, it'll be a little bit more in depth to talk about the project itself, to talk about your organisational governance, finances and things like that. And following that conversation, the assessment is written up and it comes through to us as a staff team and through to our regional advisory committee to help consider all the applications. Just a quick note on that, we are currently recruiting to that panel. So if you're interested, I'm hoping you might already have seen that advert because I've been trying to get it out into the sector as much as possible. The deadline for that is the end of tomorrow. So if that's news to you and you're interested, please do check the BBC Careers website or potentially come to me to chat about that. We would really love to see some applications potentially from people who are on this call right now. So those people advise the Regional Impact Committee, who are a subcommittee of our board, who then have the delegated authority to make the final decisions. Decisions are communicated, so you'll either be told you have been awarded and given a point of contact. For you guys, that would be me. And if you're unsuccessful, if you get to the end of the process, you can also request additional feedback, which again is more than likely going to be delivered by me. Okay, I'm just going to give you some dates now, and then I'm going to pause for some questions. So the key dates for our programme is the deadline is the 12th of April at 11:30 for both small and main grants. Assessments are in May and June of this year, and decisions are before the end of July 2021. There's two emails there. The PUDSI grants at bbc.co.uk one is for practical questions. That is things around minimum standards, around basic eligibility criteria, and the technical questions around accessing your online account, things like that. The one below that is the one which is just for our North team. So if you've got other questions around sort of the in-depth questions around what you'll be applying for, what our priorities might be, things like that, do come through to that. Okay, I'm gonna just pause there and stop sharing my screen just to see if we've got any questions. Ati, has any questions come through for anyone yet?
Brilliant. I can't see anybody yet, Chris, but thank you very much for that. And just to reiterate that this is the current deadlines for the round in terms of your times that you've given, but there will be other opportunities further in the year, yeah?
Yeah, that is correct. So that's the only deadline we've currently got, but we're expecting there to be another grant round sometime later in the year, but I don't have the dates for that yet.
Yeah, bro. And Simon, I don't know whether you want to say a few words or anything. I don't want to put you on the spot, but it's really good to have you here, and I don't want to lose the opportunity. I just think it's terribly useful when people see faces behind the funders, other than websites. I just think it's really important, those relationships and moving forward in that way.
Absolutely. No, thank you very much for allowing me to join you. It's great to be here. Chris has covered off some of the main things about the organisation, just in our grant making process. Just to say very quickly, our base is in Salford, so I'm really keen if there's ever the opportunity when we get through lockdown and we're out the other side, or even virtually, to meet some of you and talk about your projects. That would be great. Just to hear what you're doing would be really, really interesting for me. And equally, just to say, as Chris has mentioned, we're going through a process of recruiting new regional committee members, and it would be great if you had the opportunity, you thought you were interested to see your applications for that as well. And very, very briefly and quickly, BBC Children in Need has been going for 40 years. You probably know this. We are going through a bit of a review at the moment. So we are having a long, hard look at our charitable ambition. What is it that we're trying to achieve for children and young people over the next 5 years? And as part of that, what we're having is a long, hard look at what is our impact strategy. So what's the difference we want to make for children and young people? And what is our grant strategy as well? And at some stage, I'm sure Fozia Irfan, who's our Director of Children and Young People, who's leading our consideration around our grant making strategy, would love to come and have a conversation with you and get your feedback and thoughts on what we're thinking of doing over the coming years. But thanks for having me here.
Brilliant, thanks, Simon. I think we've had a question in the chat box, but Chris has answered that. Rahel, is that okay? So
yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I would say that's in normal circumstances, it's 3 or 4 times a year. COVID obviously threw that out of kilter a little bit. So we're currently working back up towards that. So we're hoping to have, like I said, 3 rounds this year. We've got 1 currently going, maybe 1 more. And hopefully next year would turn into a little bit more of normality.
Yeah.
I do have more to say kind of about what makes a great application, but I just want to check with you kind of my time that I've got left.
I think go for it, Chris. I haven't got any more questions as yet. I think people will probably, they tend to value lots of information, so that would be useful.
That is fine. I will just share my screen once more.
Brilliant. I always think it's really helpful when funders give that kind of information detail. and it's often very transferable information as well. So it's good for our capacity building.
Okay, yeah, I'll, oh, can everyone see my screen now?
No.
Oh, nope.
Just talk through it if you want, Chris. It's not a problem. We can see it now.
Oh, okay, great. Can you see the notes?
Yep.
Is everything? Okay, great. I just want to double check. Can you just see, is it just what makes a great application, or is it the notes they just well?
No, just what makes great applications.
Fantastic. If you want to give me maybe a shout when I've got maybe 5 minutes or so, that would be really useful to you. Thanks. So in your application, we'll be asking you to tell us the disadvantages the young people face and the difference you want to make in their lives, and the activities which you'll be using to bridge that sort of gap. And through that, we'll be looking for what funders call a golden thread. So what we're looking for is you to really articulate the structural disadvantages which young people are facing, the impact it has on their lives, and then the difference you want to make. And as I say, the activities you're putting in the middle of those to sort of bridge that gap. When we talk about disadvantage or who you'll be targeting through your projects, we are potentially a little bit of maybe an unusual funder because we don't want a lot of stats. What we're looking for is you to get across that you really understand the issues facing children and young people that you're working with. So a common pitfall for us is applicants telling us where in the indices of multiple deprivation their area sits, or kind of key stats from a study that might have happened a few years ago. That's fine, but it doesn't generally get across how well you know the young people, because they're stats we can get at. What we're looking for is that more anecdotal, perhaps lower level sort of information that you're getting from seeing young people come through your doors, from conversations you're having with them. It's really important you get across that you know those young people and you're really well placed to deliver to them. Top tips around there, just being really specific, and whenever you're talking about the structural disadvantages, tell us about the impact on the young people from their perspective. We are an outcomes funder, so it's really the most important part of the application. We look for achievable, appropriate outcomes. They need to be 3 distinct ones, and you need to be able to monitor and evidence them to us. A common pitfall which applicants put in is that they put in every outcome they're working towards, every difference they're making in children and young people's lives, because amazing projects like the ones which I'm sure are represented here make huge amounts of differences. But what we're looking for is really, really, really simple outcomes. I really can't emphasize that enough. Keep it simple. I've got a few examples here. So these are some examples of some strong outcomes. So improve children and young people's aspirations for the future. Young people are better able to manage their emotions around bereavement, or simply children have more fun. That is an outcome we love to fund. And as you can see in each of those, there's just one outcome, there's just one change being described. That is what we're looking for when we're talking about outcomes. So if you're starting to say a really long run-on sentence of we're working with children and young people against isolation to improve their well-being and physical health so they can improve their attainment in education and X, Y, and Z, you're probably making it too complicated for yourselves. We want simple information. Next, what's really important to us is the child focus and participation of children and young people in projects. We'll be asking, how do you keep children and young people at the heart of the project? We are looking for organisations who put children and young people really in the centre of the project. They should be involved in planning it, delivering it. They might have options to volunteer or run their own activities. They might have defined their own outcomes that they want to work towards, or develop their own monitoring tools for those outcomes. They might sit on a youth board in your organisation, or they might be able to influence your trustees in different ways. So as you're putting your application together, try and think of some concrete examples of how you have put children and young people's participation at the forefront and changed things in your organisation and project based on their feedback. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about safeguarding. Children in need take safeguarding very seriously, as I'm sure everyone on this call does. We follow NSPCC guidelines into best practice in safeguarding, so perhaps do use that as a resource. So we'll be thinking about things in terms of the level of training that you'll be giving your staff, the ratios of staff to young people based on their ages, We'll be looking for you to really evidence a strong culture of safeguarding and also be able to talk to those processes and policies you've got. It's great having those policies, but what we're looking for is you to be able to really talk to them and get across the a live culture of safeguarding in your organization. And finally, just some top tips. Check your organization meets our minimum standards. Show a really clear link between the disadvantaged outcomes and the activities. Keep it really, really simple, especially in terms of outcomes. Involve children and young people in the planning and provide as clear a budget as possible. So there's some contact details up on screen. It's got my individual email there, so do feel free to reach out to me individually. If you can't get hold of me for whatever reason, do try the operations team. Every now and then I'll disappear beneath a massive pile of applications, so I have to ignore my inbox for maybe a week or so. So if I don't get back to you straight away, please do bear with me. I'll try and get back to you as soon as I can. Okay, I'm going to stop there and just see if we got any questions.
Thank you very much, Chris. I can't see anybody with any questions, etc. Which is good. They've got all the news that they need, and it's all very clear.
Oh, someone's asked for the advert. I will send that out. I'll put the advert in the chat box just so everyone's definitely got it.
Fantastic. Brilliant. I think this is great. All the information's out there. If people want to, you've got time to apply for the next round, which is fantastic. And we will be working continuously with Chris and the BBC Children Need team. And I think in future, I think it's quite hard for people to engage in like large groups like this. And I think we'll look at doing sort of meet the funder sessions with you in future where we can allow time for breakout space so that people could have that conversation and discussion, which would be really useful. So thank you very much, Chris, and thank you, Simon, for joining us as well. And I hope we will continue to work, and we have put out the advert for your board, etc., advisory committee, and I hope you will be getting applications from hopefully some people from our network and across our network, which would be great. Thank you very much, Chris. Brilliant.
Thank you.
Great. I'd like to move on. I was hoping that the Baobab Foundation were here, but I'm not sure that they are yet. So I'm going to move on to our next speaker after that, and I'm going to bring in Charles from Caen. Are you with us, Charles?
Yes, Auntie, I'm here.
Brilliant. Thank you, Charles. So I think, Charles, we're starting to move to more sort of better news for us in the sector, and Charles is going to share some quite exciting new news with us, hopefully. I'm not going to take away his thunder on that, so I'll pass you straight on to Charles from the Caribbean African Network.
Thanks, Satya. Thanks for the invitation and thanks for the opportunity. So just to, as Satya has mentioned, I'll be talking about, something we decided to give a go, having drawn inspiration from Atia, and, just to say Caen has been part of, well, I mean, before Caen, I've been part of the network. Atia is mentored and taught many of us over the last decade plus. But over the last 3.5 years, the Caribbean African Health Network was set up with a real focus looking at, health inequalities within the Caribbean and African community. We decided to give this a go and also still learning from, the opportunities we had from Atia. Right, so the organization, we have this ambition, and we started just around the time of devolution. And it was on the back of our chair for Bruce's PhD, looking at, poorer cardiovascular outcomes for Caribbean and African people within Greater Manchester. And, on the back of her PhD, during community consultation, people were asking what she was going to do with the, data, because they get consulted and nothing happens on the back of that. And Faye did promise to do something with that data. Lo and behold, we set up as a CIC. And then what we've been doing are leading some of those strategic and, engagement and conversations on behalf of our community, as well as working with our community. So one of the commitments we made with, to the Caribbean and African community across Greater Manchester was to, ensure we don't duplicate, and as much as possible not to compete with other Black-led organizations, but make sure what we do enhances, what we do supports existing provision. And that's what we've tried to do over the last couple of years. I mean, some of the things we get involved in around, decision-making representation, as Atia mentioned earlier on, we at the moment looking at benchmarking and why it's only to majority population. So, things like even oximeter, that measures oxygen levels. There are articles that to the effect that if you are Black and, with that skin color, then you wouldn't have good reading. So we're having conversations around that, asking NHS England and Public Health England why the recommendation for vitamin D, for example, is 400 international units when we know Black people have lower. So those are some of the things. And also clearly looking at some of the structural racism and whether it's conscious or unconscious. It's more about how we work with system, and statutory partners. So we've launched a Black Cultural Awareness Program. We're delivering that to the CPS. We've just been commissioned to deliver a Black Health Improvement Program across primary care within Greater Manchester. And so those are some of the things we've been working on and trying to, really push, against, the lack of investment when it comes to community engagement. So obviously the pandemic struck, we've been providing practical support. We've set up a Black-led counseling service and also in a partnership with, some of the work that BME and other, 5 Black, BME organizations, forgive me for using that terminology. We're providing bereavement support, including complex bereavement, domestic violence, advocacy, running health webinars and winter crisis. These are 2 reports we've produced that tells, the experience of Caribbean African people during the first wave of the pandemic, but more recently, the vaccines report. Right, so to what I've been asked to talk about, the Comic Relief Global Majority Fund, we gave that a go. And at the moment, the founding priorities for CAN and Manchester Community Central, which is, Manchester City's CVS, will be helping administer that, because as an organization, we don't have any grant making experience. So the funding will be focused on practical health and welfare support, including a focus on non-English speaking, led organizations. We're going to be giving funding to activities or services that complements what is happening already, because via the Greater Manchester Comic Relief Funding, we've seen lots of applications, and thanks Atia for the opportunity to be on the panel. We've seen what £1,000 could do. We've seen, many applications come in for the 5K. Then another focus of this funding will be reducing loneliness and isolation by, helping bring people together in a safe way, even if it's virtually, so people could contribute to their communities. Right, so the funding criteria, an organization that applies has to be either Caribbean or African led or have, majority on their board or on the committee. They need to be working in one of the Greater Manchester localities or working across GM. And, your service users should be, either Caribbean African ethnicity or, wider BME, but has, that distinct Caribbean and African people in there. And we want to be innovative. So we will be taking applications in French as well, so it will be a learning, process for us. So we know there are Francophone Africans, within Greater Manchester. We started doing some work around that. We know there are Portuguese African speakers as well. We know they are Eritrean. And then we as an organization, we have some languages in-house. So we'll try and, harness that. So the funding available at the moment is 230,400. We've started conversations on, about match funding. So for example, I think Salford is committed at least 20,000 so far. The ambition is to have conversations at localities and see if we can boost that up to, 460 or, 500K. And we will be giving out, depending on how much comes in, but, with the 230K we've got, we will be giving out 10 awards, making 10 awards of 15,000 and 22 or 5,000. So we just want, you know, to really support people. And this will be for 12 months, I think, yeah. But, you know, if more money comes in and we can make, you know, bigger awards, then we will be doing that. So the next steps for us, you know, we'll be testing this out with the community. And I think what we've learned from the BME, you know, Greater Manchester BAME network is the independent community panel, because I know many people, you know, within my community, but it will be good that we have, you know, a community panel that is independent and have, you know, a staff from Mark and Khan, you know, on there. And we will, you know, be setting that up and try and finalize the, you know, the whole arrangement with Comic Relief, and with the view that hopefully in April, we launch the grants program. So that's it from me, really. Atia was mentioning, you know, vaccines. I think this has been sent out already, but a very important event coming up next Tuesday. And Khan and the Manchester BME network are all part of CORE, which is a national organization, and we've had speakers here previously. So that's it from me, and happy to take questions.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Charles. That's really fantastic news of funding coming into Greater Manchester. And it's absolutely needed, and really, really good to hear. Excellent work you've done. And of course, you are a member of this GM network and Manchester network. And, you know, we've all worked together for many, many years now. And it's really brilliant that all of this is coming through to us. So I'm sure that when, if you're able to share those slides, Charles, we'll be able to send them out to people. They can have that info, and as soon as you're ready to launch, we can get this information out widely and support the work that you're doing, and get the funding reaching all of our communities from African and Caribbean background across GM, and get some of that strength built back into our sector. I don't think that I've got any questions here yet, but if somebody wants to put questions in the chat box, perhaps later we might have a bit of time to have that conversation. I'd like to bring in, I don't know whether the Baobab Foundation are here with us yet. Are they, Owen?
No, I've just messaged them, but no, we've got Marie, but we haven't got the Baobab Foundation.
Okay, not a problem. Things sometimes urgent things come along. So Charles referred to the work that the GMBME network with GMCVO be involved with. So we were very pleased last year when at the start of the pandemic, that Comic Relief put out a big funding out there with a National Emergency Trust for emergency relief, really, for the pandemic. So we were really, really pleased, and Charles certainly was part of that team to put forward a funding application, be successful in that. And I thought it would be a really good thing to share, kind of nearly a year, well, almost 8 or 9 months on, what we have done and what we've been funding. So I've got Marie here, Marie Graham from GMCVO. We're absolutely delighted they're our technical partners in this, and we couldn't have done this without the expertise on grant making and processes that they have. So I'm going to pass over to Marie to tell you a bit about what we did with the emergency funding.
Thank you, Atia. Hello, everybody. It's lovely to be here. As Atia has just said, my name is Marie Graham, and I am here on behalf of GMCVO. And I'm the kind of program manager that's been working on this grants fund with the GM network. So I'm just going to share a couple of slides with you and tell you a little bit about what I'm going to present on today. So just give me a moment and I'll get my slides up. Excellent. So before we start, the first thing I want to say is that we don't have any current open rounds for the emergency grants for BAME communities. The funding, we still have an outstanding panel meeting, but the fund is actually closed. But what I thought would be really interesting for you today is just to see just how much work we've funded across Greater Manchester, talk a little bit about the kind of projects that we've had. but also some of the lessons that we've learned and some of the things that were kind of have come out of this grant fund, because that's really been the really interesting part of what we've been doing. So I'm not going to go over this particular, because Atia's already done it, this particular slide. And other than to say that we were awarded this funding, or the BAME network were awarded this funding, and we've been, and GMCVO have been supporting the BAME network to try and get this funding out. The purpose of the grants was to provide emergency support to BAME communities in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And the first stage, which I will say happened very quickly, we were only awarded the funding in July, and by the end of August, we were already getting funding out there. And what we did, and between August and December, the beginning of December, we actually awarded over £200,000 out to 92 GM-BAME-led organisations. And we had two main ways that we did this. It was a mix of micro grants, which were funded on a rolling programme, so people could apply for them, and they were up to £1,000. And if they met the criteria, they were funded. So it was a very quick turnaround. And then we had a small grants round where people could apply for up to £3,000. So very quick work. We got out all this amazing emergency funding. And as a result of that, Comic Relief and the National Emergency Fund give us some more funding, which is fantastic, resulting in a further grants pot of about just over £108,000. So what did we do with that second stage? So between December and through to February, we were inundated with small grant applications, micro grants, and we gave out a further £29,000 for projects under £1,000. And we actually had to close that, else we wouldn't have had any money left for our second round of the small grants that we were running, which launched at the end of December and closed at the end of February. And people could apply for up to £5,000. And previous to this, we'd always concentrated on very small groups. So most of the organisations we funded were for groups with an income of under £10,000. The slightly bigger grants were for groups with an income of under £30,000. But we opened this round up to groups for people under an income of £50,000. And this has been the result. I mean, we've not actually had the panel meeting, it's next week. So we received 164 applications, totaling £740,000, which you can see is a massive amount. And 48 of those applications were for food banks, basically. And we have our panel meeting on Monday. So the panel's got quite a job to do, because we have about £80,000 to give out. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we're going to manage that, not in any detail, because the panel are going to make final decisions on Monday about how things are going to be managed. But just before I do that, I mean, you can see we've had a massive amount of applications for food banks. And I think what's really important is that it's been very much around culturally appropriate food that people are wanting. And the demand is just huge across Greater Manchester. And these grants had led on to another project, which I'm sure Atia can tell you about as we come to the end of the presentation. But the other kind of applications we've had a lot of applications around mental health support, around people who, about trying to keep people connected by providing social opportunities, by providing information, training, support groups about mental health and well-being in different languages. We've had lots of applications trying to enable people to get digitally connected. That's been very, very important. And we've also had lots of applications, which is when we've been able to, where I've got people together outside, just actually in the park doing things together, whether that's going out for walks, whether that's doing exercise, whether that's running little support groups. And they've happened as and when it's been possible according to the COVID restrictions. So massive amounts of really essential work going on. So what's going to happen on Monday? Well, there'll be a lot of really good projects funded. That's the main thing. But as you can see from the numbers, there's going to be lots of disappointed people as well. And some of those disappointed people are going to be good applications that we just won't have enough funding to actually to kind of process. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at who we've already funded through the entire of the grants programme from when we started in August to now. We're going to have a look what communities have had funding, what communities haven't, both in terms of geography, but also in terms of identity, cultural background. And we're going to try and fill some of those gaps to make sure that proportionally people have had the right amount of funding. We'll also have a look at if projects are possibly scalable down, or whether we feel that, you know, we can join people together, link people up where they're doing similar things in similar areas with similar communities to try and make more of the resources that we've got. The main thing that we will do, though, is for all those people who are not successful, we will signpost those successful applicants to other potential sources of funding. So we're going to put together, we're going to pull a few resources together of other funding we know is out there, and we will send that out with the letter explaining that if people haven't been funded. We'll also let those funders know about our enormous grants round and the fact that we're signposting people on to them. So they're kind of prepared for that. But also we're going to be signposting people to sources of support, because just coming into the next slide, I think this is really important. This is a bit about what we've learned. There's a huge amount of need, especially in culturally appropriate food provision, and I'll let Atia speak about what she's been doing in that area. There's massive amounts of amazing work going on by volunteers and communities all over Greater Manchester, and the longer we've been doing this, the more of them we've found. We've been overwhelmed by the amazing work that's been going on. But from the applications we've received, there is obviously a need for more support and capacity building for BAME organisations in Greater Manchester. We've done our best to support people as much as we can in terms of one-to-one support, doing briefings, but there was never a development pot attached to this grant fund. So we've done what we could with what we can. We've signposted people to existing local infrastructure organisations for support, but it is really obvious that there is more needed in this space. So we are going to be signposting to people to support where we can. But I think this is probably one of the big takeaways, is that what we have out there at the moment is not adequate to support the communities that we have. So I'm going to leave it there. Atia, I just wanted to know, did you want to add anything in about the food project you've done, and anything that I've said as well around what's needed going forward?
Yep, I'll do that. Do you want to come take the slides off, and then I'll just talk to everybody? Brilliant. Thank you so much, Marie. I thought that was a really good note we wanted to kind of bring to the group in terms of the work over the last 8 or 9 months, really, in terms of that. It's been challenging, and it's been very satisfying as well to try and get that response and the emergency response. So we were very much working in that emergency environment. I remember when we first, one of the first meetings we did on the launch of that program, there was a question, was what will you do if you've got an underspend? And I've never forgotten that question. And as you could, and I think my answer was, I don't think we're going to have an underspend. And I think you can see now that we've got a very, very, very serious different problem, in that there is a huge need out there and we haven't got enough money. So I'm really pleased that we may be able to pass, and signpost some people, particularly around the continuing need around food, to the Global Majority Fund that Charles is going to be running, but also to other areas of support and funding that we have. A number of things came out of this for panel members. So the panel members were made up of the GM Leaders Forum. So Charles, for example, is on that, and Abba on this call is on there. We try to bring leaders in from different districts so that we had the knowledge and expertise about our local areas in terms of connection to our community groups, but also to the needs in those communities. And as Maria said, food was a massive issue, and it continues to be a massive issue. So we started looking at that and saying, actually, I can't even imagine how many new, just on the ethnic minority food response, how many new food banks and food providers have been set up over this last year. It's phenomenal, I can tell you, because of the numbers that we get, not just in the application, but the calls we get at the network. So we had the opportunity, because we've been working with FareShare for a very long time, and we explained this issue to them, and between them and us took the opportunity to put an application to the GMCA and got a small budget to pilot look at this whole issue. And what we've done with that is employed a couple of people to begin to map where the ethnic minority food provider and a new food bank mapping around that, to look at what is actually happening out there in the communities and where the need is. So that work is currently happening. And the purpose of that isn't simply for mapping, but it is actually to connect people to each other, so that, you know, we are finding now in one vicinity of a neighborhood, there are perhaps 5 or 6 different food providers and banks in the same area. It is about that connectivity, about getting people connected to each other and making it better, I think, and more efficient. So that is happening. We also actually are taking members on to pick up food. So for the last 8 or 9 months, certainly since March, we have a number of organizations that pick up food through us from FareShare. So I can tell you that we have redistributed through FareShare some 1.5 to 2 tons of food every week through the network of groups that pick up that food. And the other reason we've done that is to really give a specific focus to ethnic food, because there was fantastic food response and community response and support right across the system, set up by local authorities to respond to communities. We were picking up that there was an issue around ethnic food and people getting specific food that they needed. So we've put some focus around that, and we've done a bit of mapping work about what those needs are, and we have a small budget, so we will be purchasing specific ethnic foods that we have understood are needed in the system, and there are gaps, and that will be made available through the work that we're doing with FareShare as well. Now, we can't meet everybody's needs. It's because the needs are much, much bigger than I think we are capable of, but it is the start of that work. And slowly we're able to move people into a membership with FareShare, so that then they can have that more longer term support within the system, and we can recognize that that's happening. So there is quite a lot of focus around food and food poverty. I mean, food poverty is just one element of the impact I think communities are going to be feeling. We know that many people have lost their jobs, and they've got unsecure incomes, they've got lower incomes now. Children have been impacted by all of this. So it's really quite important to focus on some of those basic needs that we want to meet. And there's fantastic work going on out there, and I'm glad that in the work that Charles is doing, that there is reference to that need being recognised as well. So hopefully, Charles, we can work together after. I know you're on our panel next week, so you'll get to see all of that. Is to see if we can help organisations to move to a better, secure place where they can. The other bits that we've picked up are around capacity build. We've had lots of responses around more support with organisational development and around safeguarding in particular, and realising that actually some of those needs aren't able to be met through the infrastructure in every district. So we are looking at that as well, that we need to focus on that development and sustainability of our organizations, and particularly a lot of small organizations. So we are looking at that, and we were fortunate. The Comic Relief gave us a small budget to be able to develop the Greater Manchester BAME network. So we are looking at that and have just brought in fundraiser to begin to look at getting some core funding for the BME network and create more independence for the network to be able to move forward and be able to do some of those capacity building things that I think the sector desperately needs. So I'm going to stop there because I think that was just a piece of good news we wanted to share. And there are some fantastic feedback and reports we're getting from the groups that we've funded. And you will be amazed that even the micro grants we've given, that £1,000 for very quick emergency relief, how well that has been invested, and the amazing reports we're getting back on the impact of that funding for the community and for the groups. And so that will be shared on the website as well. And when we, Marie will be working really hard around the reporting of this whole grant at some point, and we will share that report with you all. And so yeah, thank you to Marie and to Lucas, who's not here but is behind the scenes doing a great deal of that due diligence. And I don't envy all the applications that you're going to have to go through to put before panel next week, Marie, but thank you very much for all of that. Fantastic. So I think that brings us pretty much to the end. I'm probably about a minute over. And I just wanted to leave it, this network space open for another half an hour for anybody who wants to network or talk or be able to share some of the information around what we would have discussed in our breakout spaces around vaccinations and around what's really going to help your organizations. And I don't know whether before we leave, whether the polls are able to be done. We can try it again before everybody leaves. And I know that there are a few people who wanted to exchange information. And I know Abba wanted to say something and a few others probably want to. Can I say that once if we can, that we stay on for half an hour for those of you who can, and we can do some information exchange and sharing, if that's okay. But other than that, can I thank you, everybody, for the time that you've given this morning. Brilliant. Are we going to have another go on the polls, Owen?
We can see if the poll gods are smiling on us. I've just set it up again. So I don't know what the issue was the first time around. It's 3 questions, a single answer for each one, and I added in the extra option for the third question that I think Cool Sam suggested in the chat. So I hope this works. Let's try it again.
Let's see.
We're about a quarter of the way through, so we've got about 20 people, I think, just working through it.
I still can't submit it.
No, I can't either.
That's strange.
Yeah, but some people are able to, obviously.
Yeah,
I can't submit it.
Yeah. I've submitted it, but you had to answer all 3 questions, which is a bit strange, because if you had the vaccine, then it says, would you have the vaccine if offered? And it only gives you one choice of fear when I had to look at it. But I've just answered those and sent it.
Yeah, I've had to do the same. I've had to answer each one before I can submit it.
You would, okay. I know what you like.
I think.
Have to be good. Good student.
Right, I think we'll have to practice more on polls in the future. Not a problem. But I think what it's kind of giving me, just from those of you who could, was that obviously not many people have had the vaccine yet because you won't have been invited. and that tells us about the demographic that's here, which is fine. The other question was kind of indicating that if you are invited, you are definitely going to be taking it. More people were saying they will. Yep.
I've had it. I've taken it. I didn't feel the injection at all. My mum's taken it. She's 92 and she had no side effects or anything. But then my husband's had it this week and he had to take to bed. So it's different for everyone.
Yep. Does anybody else, I mean, we could carry on now up till 12:30 and just have a general conversation on that, which would be quite useful actually. Does anybody else? I mean, I've had my vaccine. I didn't have any side effects.
No.
And I probably had what normally one might have with a vaccine, a bit of a shiver for the next day, a little bit of an arm ache, and that was it really. And that I thought was kind of normal from the last time I can imagine, remember really having had a vaccine, which was probably for travel reasons. At some point, which I think we've all probably done. Does anybody want to feed in perhaps their views, if perhaps if somebody's definitely not going to have the vaccine, perhaps what their concerns are, or perhaps what they're hearing in the community of what people's views are about the vaccine and what their concerns are?
Yeah, actually my sister had the vaccine and she felt very, very unwell for about 2 days. And my little niece also had hers because she just started uni doing nursing and she went through the same thing. So it kind of put me off actually because I'm a lactating mom at the moment. I'm kind of doubting if I should go for it because my workplace, I've been invited to come for the vaccine, but for now I said no. I don't know how it's going to react on me and the little baby that I'm breastfeeding now. So I'm not sure I will have it now.
What might help you to get through those concerns?
I think maybe I'm not all that concerned about me. I'm more concerned about the little boy that I'm breastfeeding now, how the effect of the vaccine is going to be on him. So maybe if I'll have more information or clarity or some assurance of how the vaccine affects breastfeeding children or little children that we are breastfeeding, it may help me, I think.
Brilliant. So a session around that would be quite useful, actually. It's something that we can pick up, I think. There are other forums around maternity issues, children, etc. There is a session today in the evening, 5:30, where we have 3 people from public health. One of them a clinical director who's a doctor, GP, who will be able to answer that question for you.
Okay.
So I don't know whether somebody can, or Fiona's still here, can put that link in the message, or you can certainly put your email onto the chat box and we will send you a link for this evening.
Okay, I will do that then. I think that will be very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think, and we can ask for more information and sessions around breastfeeding mums, because that's really important. Anybody else want to comment on on vaccinations and concerns? Is it Jummy? Do you want to unmute?
So I am Jumi, and I'm the founder of the African and Caribbean Women's Center in Bury. So I think one of the greatest issues with the ethnic minority population not wanting to have the vaccine is, as you may be aware of this already, there's been a lot of propaganda going on, and this has created so much fear in people. And the attitude now is, I'm not going to be the first person to take it. Let other people take it and let's see what happens to them. So I think it might be useful for the government and whoever is in the forefront of managing the vaccines, for them to put forward another kind of propaganda, informing people, just to, discountenance all the information that has gone ahead already. So all this needs to be unlearned so that they can put forward a new kind of information that will give people confidence in coming forward to have these vaccinations. Because if they have a mindset already, that it's harmful, it's dangerous, of course they're not going to come forward. And nobody wants to die for that matter, because life is the most precious thing. Within our communities, especially within the African and the Caribbean communities, people are thinking it's not safe. And they've got all kinds of religious issues with it as well, which I will have to mention as well. Some people think if they take the vaccination, it might sound funny, but they think at the end of the years, then they are going straight to hell. And we come from a very, very religious background, the African and the Caribbean people as well. So there's lots of things going on there, and there will be a lot of work that we need to do, for people to discountenance all the information that's gone ahead. Something's good. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I think that's a really, really excellent points that you're making. And I think that the system needs to hear them. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think the point that you make about people's concerns about whether, because they've got fear that, we'll wait and see when other people have had this, is probably a general view amongst not just the BAME communities, but just wider communities generally, and young people as well. So it's something there, because people are worried about how fast this has been produced, and they want all of that. So I would imagine that at some point, when more people get vaccinated from our communities, that more people will become more confident that they will go forward to have the vaccine, because they'll know more people who've had the vaccine around them. So that, I think, will come with time. And that also, I think, our communities are, the demographic of some of our communities are younger communities, so they haven't really been invited yet. So we need to find out about that too. But your points about the religious and faith issues are very important, because that's people live in those communities, and that's the networks and the information that they get. So that needs to be addressed. Some of your messages around the propaganda, I think, and what government needs to do is to reset that in a way, which is useful. So I think for those of us who will be at the meeting, a national meeting next week, which Charles talked about, and we've posted in the chat box as well, and if you can all get to that too, that will be a good place for a national level to hear that, because that's where ministers will be hearing our voice and be able to look at doing that. But I think there's a great deal of work we need to do within our communities, and I know the Caribbean African Network is doing that, and Charles is doing a lot of meetings around this. But and I think we need to have those individual conversations with people as well, to understand that.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to make a contribution?
Can I just add something, please, Atia?
Yeah.
Just wanted to, because I was in conversation with Fiona in the chat box, just to say about the some of the issues around the actual vaccine uptake, and I know that particularly in Oldham and other places like I think Bury and Rochdale as well, now there has been a lot more pop-up vaccine clinics that have been coming up in the last week and a half or 2 weeks, which has been fantastic. So I know one of the centres, but in Oldham with the EIC centre, they had about 155 people vaccinated. Of the majority of them were of the BAME community just this weekend. Just wanted to say my comment about the access to vaccines was a lot more kind of right at the beginning of when all the information was being sent out about the vaccines, and then we had again like what Jimmy said about the myths around, and then a lot of the messages in the WhatsApp messages and the passed on social media wasn't very shall I say, he wasn't very good at sending, counterbalancing some of the messages that were coming out. And I think then a lot of good work started happening with BME, started sending out a lot of information, a lot of imams, a lot of faith leaders. They all came together and they put a kind of a program together in terms of what was effective, what is good, what is not good, and how safe the vaccine is, and how, particularly from a Muslim perspective, how it is permissible to have. So that all that balance has balanced, shall I say, some of the myths and some of the messages that were really counter intuitive at the time. I see there has been a bit of a change in shift in thinking, particularly from the BAME community. At the beginning, I would definitely say, me being one of them, I would hold my hands up and say I wouldn't have been the first one to rush to have this vaccine. I don't know what it was. Well, I was really not drawn into the negative messages, but very fearful, shall I say, at the time. Turned that around quite quickly by doing my own research, informative, and being out there quite active. And I've actually had the vaccine myself. Again, not very little side effects, shall I say, just the normal ones like you mentioned. So prior to all this, I think access to vaccines was an issue in terms of people who wanted to go and have an application, who wanted a vaccine, and even those that were up over 80. Found it very difficult to actually access a vaccine local to them. And this is an experience that we had in my own particular family, where my dad had to go all the way to the Etihad Stadium when we live in Oldham, because getting into the GP surgery at the time was very difficult. The language around making an appointment, accessing an appointment, being able to get an appointment at a time. So all the kind of what I call systematic barriers that were kind of there and made it very difficult to have that. But again, that has now changed quite quickly, and I suppose it depends in which part of the borough you live in and how active the actual council is at the time. So I just wanted to add that there is, for me personally, a change in mentality now, and a change in shift and change of thinking. People are taking it, although there is still a big fear element around that, definitely.
Yeah. That's really helpful, Gulnaz, and I think it feeds into the point that I was making, that as we move forward, people will begin to start getting, because I think for our communities, there is a fear factor, there is an access issue. There are, as the system will as well start responding to understanding that issue, then we are getting that. So now we are getting the pop-ups and the targeted approach. So we see that in Manchester as well. So we've got 2 pop-ups at 2 mosques in a local neighborhood on a Friday coming up to do that. So, again, I think like everything else, lots of things happen a bit late for our communities. So this could have been done kind of from Christmas onwards at least, and been planned, and we could have been doing that, just like government started last March, and we never got information and to target it at our communities till well into the months that followed, and we had a massive impact. So, but I think your issue on local access is really important. I think we need to take that up with the GM system. I was talking to somebody from Rochdale yesterday who's been invited for their vaccine appointment to North Manchester from Rochdale. So people are being sent different places. And I know people from Rochdale have had to come to the Etihad as well. So that local access is really important, and that has come up again in terms of people getting to the vaccination centres, has been a concern, I think. Anybody
I think it's
else?
a key in that breaking down that barrier, isn't it, really? Just break down that barrier for be able to increase the uptake. And I think sometimes, some of the messages that we're hearing, particularly in the media, particularly around some of the way that it's portrayed, that the BAME community are hesitant to take up the vaccine. However, there's a bit more going on than just the BME community is not taking up the vaccine. There's a lot around the fact that, are they able to? How easy is it for them? So I think that's definitely something that needs to has been looked at, to be honest. It is changing, but it was definitely something that didn't help. It wasn't helpful right at the beginning of the program. Thank you.
We are still seeing at a national statistics level and at a local district statistics level at the moment, we're still seeing a lower take up from particular communities, particularly Pakistani communities, and from the African and Caribbean communities as well. So there is still that issue. So hopefully, with all this targeted work and addressing access issues, we can begin to see the difference in stats for us locally. Anybody else want to come in on that issue? What do you think the feel is out people you speak to out there? Do you think that you're hearing more people now less resistant and hesitant? Do you think that mood is changing?
It has changed, yes. I personally have got a lot of experiences, personal experiences of friends and family community where it's actually changed now. Those people that were so set against it at the beginning have now changed their changed their viewpoint and even opted to have that. So yeah, I think there is definitely a shift, and I think it's a coordinated approach, isn't it, in terms of getting the right messages out there, alongside everything that's going on, like you said, with the pop-up clinics and a lot of good work and a lot of messages in community languages. There's amazing work that's been going on, hasn't it, in terms of getting the right videos out. Yeah. So I think it's been actually really good. It is progressive, and I say it's in a positive sense.
And do you think people have been able to respond to the way that they've been invited, by a text message, or is that normally how people have been invited?
That's how they have been invited, but from my experience, I think that's been a bit of a difficult one. If you haven't got anybody in the family who can actually then help you navigate this text message, and that's what one of our experiences was. This is why it took a long time for my dad just to get this appointment, and we waited 3 hours on a phone, 2 hours on an internet system, and then we ended up going all the way to the Etihad. So I think that's been a very difficult. That's what, again, what I was saying about the access of how to get this appointment. So that's definitely been challenging. I think will continue to be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah. One of the things that I've noticed is that my husband, he actually managed to book his appointment online. And in booking his vaccine online, he was actually given the date for his next vaccine, whereas my mom had hers on the 18th of January, and she has no clue when she's going to have the next one. I think that's an issue as well for a lot of people. How long is the space between one vaccine and the next dose going to be?
Yeah, was that Valerie?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really concern. I mean, I can tell you that I hear a lot more for people who've had the vaccine in the first dose early on, and then they're still waiting to hear when the second dose was, who haven't been given that date. So, having given a date to people was quite useful. Mm-hmm. So the people knew, and they've had to chase for the second date. And for older people, they've been very worried and concerned about what's happening.
And the fact that if you do it online, you get both your appointments at the same time. So even before you've gone to the first vaccine, when your next one's going to be.
Yeah. And I know at the Etihad, so that's the mass vaccination centres, they give you a date for your second dose when you go for your first dose. But I think it's where people have had to text to book something online. I don't know whether all of them have had their date for the second dose, or if they're waiting for their local GP practice to call them for the first dose, and then they're waiting for them to call them for the second dose. So there are issues around that, I agree.
Yeah, I'm Yvonne. Hi. I kept quiet because I was looking on my phone. I received maybe 3 different messages with videos. They were long and about the vaccine. People from Italy, one from France, different message, but they were talking about the same thing, and they were well, I don't know how to say it. They are good people anyway. They are people above, in different certain class. So they were talking about the vaccine, asking people to do not take the vaccine because it will mess with their DNA. And also another part is, when I will find those videos, I will send them to you. Also, they were talking, saying that the people above us, the government, those people, the leaders, they are in Freemason. So I have to say that. Anyway, when I will find all these messages, I will send them to you. So it's been the COVID is man-made. Therefore, the vaccine now is just to control. It's just to control our human mates, human. So they are not advising people to take it. It will end up bringing a lot of dangerous things in our body, even if it's not now, well, in the future. Even our children, so they are just messing up with our body, and also they are giving us maybe 3 or 4 years. After these years or 5, we will not be able to buy stuff without having the vaccine. It is like a pin, to say it, puce, la puce. I don't know how to say it in English. That they want to put in they are putting in our body. And it will mess up with our gene. They know that. So now they are forcing people to have it. If you are traveling, you will be having the vaccine. You will end up having the vaccine. They will end up even forcing people to have a passport vaccine. Yeah. So I kept quiet because I can't find it as well. Once I found it, I will send you. Yeah. I stepped away from that for now. Yeah. Last time, I've never had the flu vaccine, a flu jab. I took a decision to have it last time, but I felt very sick here at home. So I'm a person who is always active, but I've not been feeling well since then. And now to go and get the vaccine for the COVID, I don't know what will happen on my body. So I will send you, it's so sure, the Freemason people who are there and such and such. So
that's a real, it's a real concern for people, isn't it, who maybe have had reactions to the flu, and that made them fearful of the reaction that might be caused by COVID. And it may be that it's something to do with, perhaps we've been told by the vaccinations that if you have particular allergies, etc., that you need to consult your GP, that there may be particular reactions or you cannot have it. So do you think, Yvonne, that these are things that you would help you to have conversation with the GP to understand why there's a reaction of the flu vaccine for you?
I've never had any reaction, any allergy, I've never had any allergy on my body. But since I had the flu jab, I've been feeling bizarre. So I don't know. Yeah, if there is any mean of me discussing with my GP, why not? But
yeah, I think you won't be alone, Yvonne. That I think that's another sort of conversation that needs to be set up for people who feel like that they've had those sorts of reactions, to have clinicians to talk about what that could be related to, and that might be helpful. So I think that's what we're moving towards, is having these one-to-one conversations and having group conversations with people who maybe can provide some of that explanation, which should be good. I've got Fackrell had his hand up, and then I've got Bernie and Paula. Fackrell.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I won't repeat too much of what everybody said, but the pop-up centres, in my experience, have been absolutely brilliant. So volunteers have gone down knocking on doors and said it's there on your doorstep. and they've had in Oldham we've had hundreds and hundreds of people going through this process. But moving on, I think the next thing we need to be getting ready for or gearing our services towards is reminding people to take the second vaccine. So as Kuzan said, I think there's been a real shift in attitudes. I think a lot of people are now prepared to take the vaccine and have taken the first dose. We just need to get ready to remind people not to miss the second one. But I say everything's been said. It's been a fantastic presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Bernie?
There are explanations for the way that people react strongly to the vaccine. Sometimes it's the fact that you've built up some antibodies already, so your body responds quickly. But we need more opportunities for those kind of conversations with people with expertise, but also to recognise who people recognise as the experts. Do you know what I mean? I was at a session yesterday, which was an excellent session about the internet and becoming more internet savvy, that was run by Buzz. It was fantastic and it worked well for a lot of people, but there was a lot of people who I realised didn't take on trust that somebody was an expert or a doctor or a researcher or whatever. And I realised that we need to get to a different level somehow.
Yeah. I think that's probably true of lots of things in terms of social media, because social media is so powerful, isn't it now? And then we as a Manchester BME Network, we do lots of work on social media with our communities, particularly on issues that we've had to deal with before around radicalisation, and to just, try and teach and learn and share with community about how much, misinformation and fake information is goes through social media, and that we need to be careful about that. And how do we address that? Because it's not a lot of people have just been forwarding things, haven't they, that they've seen everybody, regardless of looking at where they're coming from, because quite often they're coming from people who say they are reputable clinicians. And how do you know that they're not, So it's a very big issue, I think, in terms of social media. Paula?
Hi everybody. It's been a lovely meeting. Yeah, it's been a really miserable 12 months, I think, for everybody. And some of the young people, I think, have really been getting blamed for the spread of COVID. And I've had some really refreshing conversations recently with some young people who are actually looking forward to taking the vaccines, because they're like saying, well, they'll be getting back to normal. They'll be able to go on holidays with their friends. A lot of them don't want to miss out on the festivals as well that's coming up in summer, and they've missed out on university and Freshers Week, etc. So I think really that's a really good insight for us to remember that it's, the young people are there and they are willing at the moment, most of them, to get back and get the vaccine so that we can get back to normality. And I think maybe we ought to take a leaf out of their books as well and look at the positivity. I mean, they aren't actually not concerned about the protection of the vaccine and saving lives. It is about getting back to normal.
Thanks, Paul. I think that's a really important point, actually. I mean, I think there are arguments, aren't there, about the way that the vaccine prioritization cohorts have been set up by parallel level. There should have been cohorts for younger people and people who could get back into work and study, etc., and get the economy moving a bit faster. So there are lots of arguments around all of this. And of course, younger people getting vaccinated, particularly in our communities where they live within intergenerational homes, are protecting other people within their families and older members of their families as well. So that's really kind of important. But I take your point. I think there's, we sometimes are looking at blaming young people, but actually, with the whole year of challenge, we will see the other side of what the impact has been. I mean, there's been so much increase in mental health and well-being for everybody, particularly for younger people, because they've really missed out on quite a lot and had a significant, change in their lives, if in terms of education alone. So yeah, I think it's an important point. Brilliant. I think we're well past 12:30 as well now, and being a really terrible chair today. But I think that's been a really useful half-hour conversation. Thank you, Owen, for suggesting this. And it's been really wonderful to talk to people. And maybe we will think about putting on some more conversations like this around COVID and the vaccine, and as we move forward, particularly on some of the points that people have brought up on things like, for example, breastfeeding mums, you know, and how they feel about the vaccine, and on Yvonne's point about why she felt so unwell after the flu vaccine, and other people will have that issue too. And as we move forward with those of people amongst us who have had COVID, who are living with long COVID, you know, and how and what services are there for them, which are just beginning to come in front of us. So, you know, we're just starting to see the long COVID clinics being introduced into the system now. So, you know, this is going to be here for some time for us to have conversation on, and to look at and try and help the system. But it's really important for us to have the vaccine because, you know, we just creating further inequalities for our communities, more than that we've already had. And as we know, we've been impacted by COVID much more than others, and there's been a disproportionate impact because of our inequalities in the system. So I will kind of end there. It's been really wonderful. Thank you very much.
I've sent you one on your phone.
Okay, thanks, Yvonne. Yeah. Thank you. But brilliant. Thank you very much. And please keep on coming and supporting. And if anybody wants to come along to the evening session, Fiona's posted it in the chat box. And please come and join us. And I can see a lovely baby now as well in the picture. So welcome to our very new younger member. Fantastic. Brilliant. Have a lovely rest of the afternoon and evening, and everyone keep well and keep safe.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.